What's the most NSFW thing you saw go down at work? Saw my boss and coworker making out. They were both married at the time. Each came into my office later that day and had a sit down with me on why these types of things happen. I was 26 at the time. I feel like this is missing important context. Did the boss and the coworker organize those sit-downs? If so, that's weird. It's like the kind of talk that parents would have with their children when they walked in on them banging. We now have a Discord. Check out the server in the link in the description. Story 2. First day at a job and out of nowhere, an employee yells across the office at the boss. "We all know you're cheating on your wife with the secretary." The boss freaked out and started yelling at all of us that his personal life is none of our business. The secretary was crying and they both left. I was supposed to be training with the boss that day, but because he was gone, we just all went down to the street to some Mexican restaurant and drank all day. Pretty cool gig, even if it was very short-lived. Well, it's no one's personal business but the secretary, I guess. Seriously though, what a way to break the allegations, huh? It's like, oh, my personal life is none of your business, and then walks out with the secretary. Come on. Story 3. Working part-time at Toys R Us one Sunday, I got a call on the radio to please remove a couple of people from the diaper section. When I got there, I found 2 middle-aged people banging, and she was pressed against the rack. When I told them to stop, he just turned at me with an offended look while standing fully erect. It was an awkward escort out of the store. Story 4. I was working second shift security in a pharma company, and a line worker came out of the boss's office all disheveled. The boss had gone home already, so I kept watching and 2 dudes came out of the office a few minutes later. One was still putting his pants back on. They were extremely surprised that the door to her office was on camera. Turns out one of the dudes had stolen a master key from a janitor's cart and had been using the manager's office as a bang pad. Story 5. Back in the 90s, I worked at a car wash. Across the alley from the car wash was a small condo with a balcony facing us. One day, a guy was totally banging his girlfriend from behind on the balcony facing us. They were clothed, but pants dropped, skirt hiked. We started to notice after a while, and as we pointed and showed more coworkers, their tempo increased and then they finished. And we cheered them on. Story 6. I had a coworker that took massive amounts of drugs on busy construction sites, to the point where he would sway around and barely keep his feet. The company knew but were so desperate for workers that they turned a blind eye and never did anything about it. Crap company. Couldn't keep anybody longer than a year except this guy. Many close calls on the sites, and somehow never died. One day he just drove off a site in the middle of the day. The company trucks were GPS tracked, so they found him OD'd in it in the shady part of town. Story 7. Wasn't there, was narrowly leaving before this. 30F assistant manager at Burger King had a post-close birthday party at Burger King. Most of us were high schoolers besides her and 1 or 2 others. Last 3 people at the party are her and 2 17 to 18-year-old guys that I knew well. She had a MMF threesome with both of them at the Burger King. She was also engaged. Cameras captured pretty much all of the event. I came in the next morning to the general manager explaining what had happened and that we had 3 new openings. Story 8. Cinema usher. End of the night and waiting for final films to finish and clear up. One guy was sitting in the back row. We would be standing at the front and to the side, watching the credits. It's not uncommon for this, but the end credits finish and he is still there. I begin to walk up the stairs towards him and he hasn't noticed me, and I can make out that he looks like he's asleep. As I get closer, he suddenly looks at me and mouths something. Another head pops up from his lap. Another guy had been going to downtown with him. I instantly froze. I turned around and walked back down to the exit. They rather sheepishly left a few minutes later. I thanked them for their visit and hoped they enjoyed the movie. Story 9. I worked for U-Haul about 11 years ago, and the location was behind a sketchy club that changed ownership constantly from lawsuits and crap. I came in one Saturday to open and my manager was late, so I was alone. I get inside, start pulling the displays out to the showroom and crap, and I hear a loud bang on the front door. Scared the crap out of me. I look over and there's a naked girl out there crying and begging me to let her in. I grabbed a moving blanket to cover her and called the cops. She was covered in her own crap and had dried blood all over her. Turns out she got drugged at the club that night and got assaulted, and was left out there passed out. When she came to, she came running to the first place she saw, which was U-Haul. Story 10. I see some people posting work-related injuries on here, so I'll share mine. I used to work in the kitchen at a fine dining restaurant. We were supposed to say oven door whenever we would open it, especially if someone had their back turned to you. The guy that I worked with was super shy to the point of not saying things when he should, and so he didn't tell me that he opened the door behind me. I turned around with a handful of trays and my arm smacked right into the door. It was so hot that I didn't even realize that I got burned until I pulled my arm away and my skin was still on it. He never apologized for it, and I got real sick of seeing his guilty puppy dog look. The look that he would give me every day for the rest of the time that I worked there. Story 11. I was a bartender working at a popular psychedelic drug-themed pizza chain in my college town. Guy sat at the bar for about 30 minutes and we talked about music and playing guitar, and he just seemed like a super nice, cool guy. Then he was like, "I'm gonna grab a table and eat now. Good talking to you." Left a solid tip. But what he really meant was, "I'm gonna go sit in a booth and stare at that table of girls while I jerk it under the table now." And that's what he did. Luckily, the girls immediately and loudly called him out and we ran him off. We heard rumblings around town of the same thing happening at several other spots as well. What has to happen to someone in life for that to be like, "Yep, this is what I'm gonna do now"? Just for so many reasons, it seems like a bad idea. The kind where I'm not sure how anyone thinks of it. Story 12. I used to work at a museum. We had a strict zero food policy in the museum galleries. There was an interactive kids exhibit in one of our rooms about nocturnal creatures. And there was a little campfire corner with an actual camping tent set up. I was making rounds one day and all of a sudden I hear this munching sound coming from the tent. It literally sounded like someone was loudly chewing oatmeal in there. Me, not even thinking about it twice, popped my head right into the tent, ready to say something along the lines of, "Excuse me, food items aren't allowed in the..." With horror, I realized the origin of the sound wasn't some kid eating snacks, but a full-grown couple aggressively making out with each other, with tongue and drool and everything. All I could do was freeze. I happened to look down and the woman was jerking the guy off by palming him over his jeans without a care in the world. All of this inside of a campfire tent in a kids' nocturnal creatures exhibit. I was too shook to tell them to go, so I went to find the nearest maintenance worker we had working. He was an ex-military sergeant in his 60s. He gave them one hell of a speech. I was in shock the whole time, but highly entertained. Story 13. Woman pulled up behind our building. We had on-site security and lots of cameras. She stops, gets out, drops her pants, and craps behind the building. Security goes out and asks what she's doing. She scoops her mess up with napkins and drives away. Our office was near a mall and an interstate highway. There were restaurants and fast food places everywhere. There was no reason for her to do that behind our building. Story 14. I'm a teacher. Our smart boards are linked to our computers, but you can freeze what's on the board so the students can do the work and you can check emails or do registers, whatever. One guy thought he'd frozen the board and proceeded to send frisky messages to his missus over email during a lesson. He was at least smart enough to use his personal email, but he was dumb enough to not check that the board was actually frozen. Result was students photographing the rather scandalous emails and Snapchatting them to each other. I work on a different site and within 2 hours it was all over my site as well. The guy no longer works with us. Story 15. I worked at McD's way back in the day, talking early 00s. One of the nighttime janitors was named Frankie. He was Quebecois with a dirty sense of humor, so we got along well. One night shift I was washing dishes in the back, while Frankie changed one of the grease traps. He slipped on the wet floor and dropped the boiling grease all over himself. This was all directly in front of me. Like some of the grease splattered onto my crappy vinyl work shoes, ruining them. It was messed up. Never heard somebody scream like that in my life. Literally hot grease all over him head to toe. Because it was a grease burn, we had to take off all of his clothes so it didn't melt into his skin. Pretty sure the 911 operator told us to do this, but it may have just been the quick thinking of the manager. Anyway, poor Frankie, covered in grease burns, cursing like a bastard, stripped down to his tidy whities. He had to wait for some paramedics to arrive and treat him, and I got out of there a little after midnight. He recovered and eventually became the nighttime manager at a Walmart McD's. I used to see him all the time afterwards, and he seemed to have recovered quite well. No scars on his face anyway. This man is impervious to trauma. How can he continue to work in the environment that caused that to happen? I'd be like, no thanks, I will try, anything else. Story 16. I had to mediate an intra-office issue where employee A refused to interact with employee B in any sense after they'd had a bad date. This wouldn't usually be a big deal, but it's healthcare and cooperation is necessary. Employee A is furious that employee B walked out in the middle of their date. and said that he was humiliated just looking at her. Employee B basically agreed to be professional at work and admitted that she shouldn't have walked out of the date, except she was in shock. At this point, we're a little concerned that whatever shocked her might be a liability to us. Drugs, a stash of illegal materials, whatever, etc. So we take them and talk to them separately. Employee A has no idea what we're talking about. Employee B wants to be discreet but eventually tells us. Apparently the date was going well, so they decided to skip the movie and go back to Employee A's place after dinner. He pulls a, "let me go get more comfortable," while Employee B waits in the living room. Employee A comes out in head-to-toe adult baby clothes, diapers included, and then hands her a strap-on. In actual baby talk voice, he told her what intimate acts he wants her to do to him. His preferences were never discussed beforehand. Let me tell you, taking notes on that entire situation in a way that could be disseminated to the President of Human Resources was a task. That, right there, is either a lot of confidence or a huge lack of self-awareness. Story 17. I worked in a kitchen at a hotel that had a ballroom for events. We hosted a sorority spring formal or something, and it got pretty crazy. There were people banging everywhere. There was a private set of lockable bathrooms in the hallway by the pool, and we kept having to yell at couples to get out of them. One of my coworkers was a Mormon kid who wouldn't drink caffeine, but he walked into a closet and a girl was riding on a dude on the floor. She kept the door closed while maintaining motion, as people tried to pry the door open to get them out. Also, people doing it behind the dumpster outside. When I finally left, there was a couple doing it in the car next to mine. We also hosted father-daughter dances for older teenagers, 14 plus, which was super weird. Female coworkers informed us that the daughters were patting their bras in the bathrooms. Not sure who their intended audience was. The mother-son dances weren't much better. The mothers would rank the sons on a hot scale. Oh, and they sold alcohol at both. Imagine a bunch of old dudes hanging around drinking beer, watching their daughters twerk on each other. You can't fool me, OP. I will absolutely not be thinking of that. I am not going to imagine that whatsoever because I can feel Chris Hansen just around the corner. Story 18. I worked janitorial at a university and was on the early morning shift. It was normally pretty quiet, 4:30 a.m. with few people around. One morning I went to get onto an elevator and there were two people having vigorous, there was that awkward moment of us staring at each other as the door stayed open for a few seconds and then closed again. I had a good laugh and then went about my work thinking little of it. Fast forward 3 years. I meet this girl and I start dating her. After a few months, we end up going on a camping trip, and we were going to meet a few of her friends out there. When we arrive at the campsite, there was a second awkward moment as I recognized the couple from the elevator, and they recognized me. When my GF introduced us, the three of us almost simultaneously said, "We've met." When my GF asked when and how we met, we just burst out laughing and ended up telling the story. Small world. So what I've learned from this story is couples that bang in elevators together stay together. Noted. Story 19. Was interviewing two partners, one male, one female, of a company I was interning for. The man was talking about the history of starting the company and started with, "When we started this company, I was banging many women, one of whom was my wife, and one of whom is sitting in this room." He then proceeded to go on a tangent about how he was a big dong swinging jerk in his youth, who could get the job done. But he had improved and turned into a nicer person. He hadn't, by the way. The poor female partner looked like she wanted to unalive him right there. Unfortunately for her, they had definitely been sleeping together when starting the company. She asked me to leave, and then I was called into a meeting a few hours later. He had been scolded hard by the female partner. He sheepishly asked me to keep that meeting between us and to tell no one. Oh well, here I am. What was his game plan here? Was it a flex? Was that supposed to be a flex? That's so weird, man. Story 20. I've got 3 that I vividly remember. When I was a janitor, I caught 2 of my coworkers going at it on the conference table. I just waited by the door with cleaning supplies in hand. After letting them finish, I made them clean their mess up. I wasn't going to do it. I'm not being paid enough for that. Then, while I was a FedEx contractor, I had a lot lizard proposition me at a truck stop. I was making a delivery and she snuck into my truck. Then she got naked and waited for me. Yeah, no thanks. I was on camera. And I didn't want to get into trouble. I got yelled at that evening for not fully securing my truck. Like I even expected that to happen. Second one, again while I was a FedEx contractor. I was working my cousin's route since she was sick at the time. I've got a case of alcohol that needs a signature. No problem, I've done this plenty of times. I knock on the door and this fat dude answers completely naked. I think he was expecting my cousin since he goes, "You're not so-and-so." Oh, "You done goofed now, son." He got his alcohol, but I also scared him crapless. I calmly explained to this idiot that while I wouldn't do anything permanent, her 200-pound, 6'7" Marine father would beat the crap out of him and bury him if he found out. Told my cousin about him later. Turns out he's a frickin' perv. Been laying it on her a little too thick for weeks. She never had to deal with his crap again since she quit about a year afterwards. FedEx just has a way of breaking you, you know? Hey Reddit, if y'all are gonna play the delivery man game, at least wear your damn underwear, you frickin' savages. If you know the guy or gal and they're cool with it, more power to you. But I'm sure most of them don't want to see random dongs while on the clock. That job was stressful enough as is. Story 21. Older guy getting a handy at the bar. Yes, everyone knew what was happening within a minute. No, they weren't a couple. Yes, they both had significant others that weren't there. No, they did not finish. I only saw it as the cook because my bartender told me to come help her break them up, in case there was trouble. I thought she was screwing with me, or that it would be hard to tell. Nope. She was tugging him hard enough to make me wince in pain. He was bare naked with his pants down to his knees and his forehead was on the bar, groaning. This was New Year's Eve, so no one sat outside. Our bar sits 15. We have 3 high tops that sit 2 to 3 people, and 6 low tops that sit 4 to 5. So we can max sit 60 people. We had maybe 30 that night. Most knew both of them and their spouses. Haven't seen her or either spouse since. Seen him once, though. Told him he was banned and then had to explain why. Funniest crap I ever saw. Story 22. Used to work security at a hospital in South Carolina. We would often have mental health patients in the ER before they were admitted or discharged. One in particular crapped on himself and rubbed it all over his body. This dude was about 5 foot 10 inches, running through the ER covered in crap head to toe. One of our officers, who was ex-Marines, was about 5 foot 1 inch, think little bulldog energy. They pick up this dude mid-sprint and pile drive him onto his face. And then they drag him halfway back to his assigned room before realizing he's leaving a trail of crap. Our uniforms were also white polos, and this was in the summer. Dude got called the Turd Wrangler for the longest time. Story 23. Coworkers were banging in the office next to mine. They were very enthusiastic about it, so much so that the pictures on my wall kept shaking and rattling. Funny story, the only person who didn't know was the company CEO. He found out they were breaking the rules after he saw them making out on an outbound flight to Vegas, that he just happened to be on. Turns out they were both very sick and needed the week off to recuperate. They were both informally fired from the company at baggage collection. Story 24. I manage a self-storing facility, so I've seen some weird crap over the years, but this one takes the cake. One day I was reviewing our security footage for proof that a tenant had been on the grounds after the posted access hours. I ended up noticing that another person, not a tenant, just some random guy, had wandered into the elevator lobby at around 1 a.m. Nothing unusual, that happens fairly often. This guy walked in, sat down, and started smoking something. He spent the next half hour or so taking hits off his pipe and seemingly getting more and more agitated. Then it happened. He started taking off his clothes. But not just getting undressed, oh no. He was dancing and peeling his clothes off slowly, twirling each piece around before flinging it aside, totally doing a striptease. He gets completely naked and then reached into his backpack and pulled out a few things. He pulled on a tiny pair of lacy underwear and some platform shoes, and then danced around a bit for a few more minutes. Then it got really weird. He reached into his backpack again and pulled out a can of shaving cream and a razor. One at a time, he propped his legs up against the wall and shaved them from his ankles to the tops of his thighs. When he was done, he sprayed some more shaving cream into his hand, pulled out his dong, and stood there vigorously jerking it. He laid down and nut on his stomach and then rubbed it into his skin. He sat up and started taking hits off his pipe again. About an hour later, a cop car pulled into the parking lot. The officer apparently called for backup, and eventually 3 more cruisers pulled up. They took the guy into custody and drove away. I've cleaned up more disgusting messes at work, but mopping up dried clumps of shaving cream the next morning grossed me out more than anything else.